music for all types of life things. Like, you know, there's bath taking music, which I'm pretty fond of. That was my goal for at least 20 years, to make the best bath taking music. So that got to be in the game. My old friend that I was in a band with called me up and said, "Hey, I got this gig, and would you want to do it with me?" And it really just, and I was the engineer. It was at my house, and he had said, we had lost touch, you know, it was like 5 years or 6 years. And he said, we were talking, and he was like, "Man, all the records that I dig right now are weirdly the ones you have done or were part of." And so that's really how it happened. And I, at that moment, because they were demoing for a year, and when I got involved, I was just the engineer, and then they were like, "Here, do you want to do one of these tracks?" And so my first song I wrote was the main theme of the first Red Dead was like, and so it just went from me being a jazz musician and a weirdo to whoa, I have something to say. That makes sense, like minimalist in that way, and a pretty song.
Got some money for me, boy? Seen your name in our ledger.
With video games now, they've become more, they can be, but they come a little more like movies, because you have cutscenes in between the actual gameplay, and so the cutscenes are really scored like a film. And so you have those. But then when it gets into the open world and into the gameplay, that's when all the rules get thrown out. And for me, I actually, it came organically, but I actually just developed all my own styles of that problem, of how to make music. At that time, how do you make music where they don't turn it off and play something else? And so this gets into my all my concepts of space and things to leave space. And so for the open world, you would have you're walking around, and you would have, like, the first game, Red Dead, we did stems, which are like, you know, you'd have, the easiest way to look at that is like, oh, you have bass, you have drums are separate, you have guitars are separate, and then a melody, and so those can play at different times. So in the, that's developed even more so now, where they get blurred, but so that's the basic part of it. But for me, where it started, you have this part where basically I looked at it like you're going to get a drink and the game's on not pause, but you're walk away to go get a beer or whatever, and you come back. And so that music there is not to any time constraint, or like a tempo or anything. Like, it's a key, but you would just to give it, so almost like Foley, if that makes sense. So you have like for instance, even that thing, let's see, like, you would go like, and then you would let that ring out for, you count to 30. And I like numbers like that, not 30 bars, but just count to 30, and then you would play something else, you know. And so that's how it started with the first Red Dead, and it developed throughout L.A. Noire and GTA 5. And then for this Red Dead 2, I incorporated, I'm always working with musicians too, and so it's more of a call and response thing. For GTA 2, I would do these things at home, these little things. Leave the space, and then you do and then you play again, and after you leave the space and do it again, you do that, like, usually ends up about 5 minutes, so it's nice to have a 5-minute loop. But now I took it further, and gets into this real-time human granular synthesis thing that I've been developing, and actually it's developed already, but I would take that then and stretch that performance out and make it like a minute between each performance, and then I would bring in, for this one it was like Gabe Witcher on violin, and Jay Bellerose on drums, and this guy Ben Peeler would play dobros and things, but they would respond to my call, and they could respond exactly like that, or with these guys you can develop it in a real response, and that gets into the details of the most common musician will take it's easy to copy someone. You play something and then you play it right back, and that's sort of like the core of being a musician, of like learning, and but to take it to the next level is that you're responding. And then that makes it free. So then by the end of like 10 minutes, the guys are really comfortable and they're all playing and interacting to responding to it. And so that ended up being like maybe only 2 or 3 days of that. But a lot of that was the open world. So then I have parts, I can take my call out, and then I have just the response. So then it flip-flops that way. Or I can take, leave my part in and only use one other part. And this is all only just for the ambient music. So when it gets into the next part of the game, where say you pull out something happens, you push somebody by accident or whatever, and something happens, and so it has to ramp up a little bit. So then in that section, you have usually, they call them missions, but usually the missions have, in the games that I work on, I'll make them all one tempo in one key, so it's not a cluster of nonsense. And so then you end up getting into BPMs and strict things, and then or not so much that cliched, but yeah, it's like you get into more movement, and so that's really the tip of it. I could talk a lot more about it, but that's kind of the difference between the films and the...
Ain't no such thing as civilized.
You're the only one of these fools that I trust.
Where's our money?
I really love Westerns, and I really love the past, and I really love the sounds, but I really love the present. And I think from the research I've done, owning like all 400 Morricone scores and things like that, that what I take from it is that, especially with the Sergio Leone movies, is that it's a departure altogether. It's not even Western music. When they did it, that was 60s psych. It was not, and it wasn't even, a lot of movies you play in a certain period, and that's the period of the music. This was, totally a departure. And I took that as you can do anything you want for a Western. It doesn't have to be anything as long as it conveys emotion. It can be any kind of music you want. And this takes me back even further, because I had just 5 years to think about all these things, is that I'm very into Kurosawa films, and the composer is Masaru Sato, who is bigger than Morricone influence to me, because they did this movie called Yojimbo, which was like Fistful of Dollars is a direct adaptation of it. But actually, if you watch Yojimbo, the music is a complete departure from feudal Japan.
このざまだ。だから言わねえこっちゃねえ。6人ぐらいじゃ手不足だ。
Whoa, this is not only like hip, it was done earlier too, so it's, to me it's like, should be done more, if that makes sense. Like, the music, you should just make good music, and it doesn't need to be locked into some cliche. That being said, it is a Western, and so I did do a lot of things that were Western sounding, but we flip-flop probably 4 times between like extremes and like a classic Western. And in the end, it ended up being hopefully something a little different.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a robbery.
Sons of Dutch. Makes us brothers. Sometimes brothers make mistakes.